Tell me when is it being recorded?
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Taylor Lewis, and on behalf of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County, I thank you for joining us and welcome you to this, our 24th, in a series of conversations with family historians and others who share their genealogy research or provide us with information related to local African Americans and their history. At AAHA, we are committed to collecting, documenting, preserving, and sharing U.S. history with a special interest in the African American experience in Fauquier and neighboring counties. It has been our hope that these virtual events will offer a good sense of the richness and the unique history and culture of local African Americans. We also hope that they will serve as a gateway to our website at aahafauquier.org, or that they might encourage you to stop by our location at 4243 Loudon Avenue in the Plains, Virginia. We are open Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You will find that both the Resource Center in the Plains and the website contain an enormous assortment of data that would be of interest to historians, genealogists, educators, students, and anyone else who would be curious about local African American history and culture. The AAHA website is an exceptional online resource. It provides a virtual tour of the AAHA Museum and an interactive story map of the history of Fauquier County's African American communities, churches, and schools. In addition, there are links to our digital map center, the Morgantown School Project, as well as local news stories about AAHA's involvement in the community. And of course, there are connections to various social media outlets. So do visit us at aahafauquier.org or drop by our office in the Plains. We also invite you to our Facebook page each Thursday for a brief history of the African American schools in Fauquier County that served the community prior to integration in the 1960s. Also on Facebook, we will soon begin to post regular snippets of historical information related to the African Americans in Fauquier. An example would be Fauquier birth certificates from 1912 to 1917 showed that Susan Baltimore, a midwife, delivered at least 34 babies in the Marshall District. So remember to visit our Facebook page every day that you can. We are delighted and excited to announce that the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County recently became one of 11 recipients of a grant from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, VMHC Commonwealth History Fund. As such, we have been awarded $50,000 to continue our Know Their Names project, in which our goal is to identify by name the enslaved population of Fauquier County from 1759, when Fauquier was organized, up until 1865, when slavery was abolished. From the time the project began about 2 years ago, AAHA has been able to build a database of almost 60,000 entries from in-depth analyses of documents such as county records, Bible records, diaries, newspaper accounts, and journals. The VMHC grant will help us to merge all these entries into one large digital document where people will be able to search for an ancestor, whether they are free or enslaved. So keep in touch, and AAHA will keep you informed. Now, as we close out this year's Black History Month, during which we have set aside time to celebrate and honor the history, contributions, and achievements of African Americans in the United States, I'd like to take this opportunity to give a shout out to the co-founders of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County. They are Karen Hughes White, our director and president of the board, and Karen King Lavore, our vice president of the board. These two extraordinary daughters of Fauquier County met in the 1980s while researching their individual family histories. They soon became friends as they dug deeper and deeper into the records. With the support of the African American Historical and Genealogy Society, they decided to start their own organization, and AAHA was founded nearly 31 years ago. Both Karen Hughes White and Karen King Lavore are descendants from freed and enslaved African Americans. In addition, the two are authors, along with Courtney Gaskins, of the book entitled Fauquier County, Virginia Register of Free Negroes from 1817 to 1865, which was published 30 years ago this year. It is an understatement to say that these are phenomenal women in the field of local African American history. So let's give them both a handshake. Shout out. Thank you, ladies, for your marvelous work. Now, about today's guest. I have known today's guest for at least 20 years or so. We would see each other during special afternoon services hosted by our churches. Last year, she was a guest of these AAHA virtual events, along with Jim Stribling, to talk about their shared story as it relates to the Stribling family farm. Darlene King Green resides in the Fauquier village of Hume. She is the daughter of Bedford and Bertha King. Her ancestors have been residents of Fauquier County since the Revolutionary War. Darlene is a retired social service worker who stays busy assisting the homeless. She is a member of the Mount Morris Baptist Church in Hume, where she has served as church clerk for over 12 years. Darlene and her husband, Deacon Daniel Green, have 3 daughters, 1 son, 3 grandsons, and a granddaughter. Hello, Darlene, and welcome.
Thank you.
We thank you so very much for joining us again, and this time to talk to us from the perspective of a local church clerk about the value and the importance of maintaining efficient church records.
Thank you.
So tell us, Darlene, in your own way, what we should know.
Okay. Well, first of all, different churches have different ways or different descriptions of what their clerk does.
Mm-hmm.
If you, each church has a church covenant,
Mm-hmm.
and it's usually outlined in an article. I don't see my articles and stuff up yet.
Okay.
My slides,
Okay.
but
Excuse me.
and we have specific duties as well that we have to do. So one of the things that we of course do is maintain the church records of old. And what I try to do is preserve those old records because they are just a wealth of information regarding history of the church and the people who came before us. So I first got started with this with our church anniversary back in 2017, I'm sorry, when we were celebrating our 150th anniversary.
Okay.
And I thought, since that was such a milestone, that we should do something a little different than what we had done in the past.
Okay.
But going back to the church covenant, or what we say is the church constitution and bylaws. Mount Morris has its own constitution and bylaws, and the church clerk, Article 15 is outlined in it and what her duties are. However, any church clerk knows that our duties are more than just these two items that are outlined on Article 15.
Sure.
So, of course, we prepared agendas for church business meetings. We collect reports from ministry leaders in preparation for the business meetings, record meeting minutes during meetings, send out condolences letters and cards to bereaved families, announce upcoming church events, and send out notice of events to community churches. We record baptism, new members, and deaths, and issue birth, baptism certificates, and new members certificates. Now that's important because baptismal records can serve as a legal document to prove identity. So it's really important that we record it. We give, of course, the baptism person a copy, and then I keep a copy.
So they're always on file at the church in case someone needs a
In
copy
case someone
to
needs
prove
it.
that they were baptized.
Right,
Yes,
so
okay.
that we can give out a copy. And of course, we read acknowledgement and church letters for members' funerals. So,
Yes.
you know, those are some of the duties of the church clerk, but, you know, sometimes we have to wear many hats, you know, so we do other things other than that. So that's what I do at Mount Morris, you know, along with some other things, but those are the things that are just, you know, basic.
You definitely have done.
Yes. One of the things that I really have come to cherish and has been a great help for me in recording history of Mount Morris is the documents and that I have found from old. I have, you know, we have the old church record book that we have, that I was fortunate enough to get and to be able to preserve. I'm looking for it. Here it is. This is one of our oldest books.
It's the old church record book.
It's a church record book, and it dates back to about 1880.
Oh my.
And so that has a list of the members and different milestones that happened. This book also records, you know, when they were baptized, with their date of birth, their date of death. And I tried to keep it up with of course, our new members. So this is a book that I really, really cherish. And I really would like to preserve some of the pages, you know, maybe scan it into the computer so that we know that we would always have a record. But this is something that I keep in a safe, a fireproof safe, so that if anything should happen, that it would be protected.
That's awesome.
Yes. So, and like I was saying, with the birth certificate, with the certificates of memberships, these are some of the ones that we give out to show the date and time that they were, their name, the date, the time that they were baptized or even became a member of the church. We have a second book, a record book, which starts about 1900, early 1900, which also has a list of names that I also am wanting to scan into a computer. I haven't done these two books yet because, you know, it takes a lot of time. So I haven't had the time, but I am going to devote time to doing that. So
are you saying that you're on your third record book?
Well, yeah, actually I am on my third record book. You know, there's all sorts of records, you know, documents in the church that we can use.
All of them are in record books, but they are in other places.
Right, and they need to be consolidated, and I've been trying to do that. Haven't devoted as much time to it as I want to, but that is something that is on my agenda to do. In records, the church has so much information that we take for granted. You know, we don't realize that people coming behind us, this is really important for them. We have a Mount Morris Baptist Church church history that was in September of 2002 that some of the members there put together. And that helped me in my research for the 2017 anniversary, for our 150th anniversary. So it had like a lot of the names of the people who started the church, the first members. And then when I was able to link those people in that book to present members who are ancestors of those people, it was really, really rewarding. Because then I could really link these people and to be able to realize that this is like 8 generations at the same church. So that was always so
8 generations.
8 generations from the very beginning, from the first pastor. In the 58 years now, we have only had 8 pastors. So that's unusual in itself, 8 pastors in that amount of time. We also have like a Sunday school, church school minute book. And that is something that records who's in attendance, what the subject matter is. It even gives us how the weather is and everything that's going on in that on that day. And this is significant, this Boyd's Sunday School Church minute book, because this Boyd's publishing company was started, it's the oldest Black Christian publishing company in the United States. It has an exhibit at the African-American Museum in Washington, D.C. Boyd. And this is what we have used for our Sunday school lessons, And this is significant because in Reverend Washington, Alfonso Washington's book, All in God's Time, he talks about the gentleman who started Boyd's publishing company.
He was a Boyd?
Yes. Wow. And it's interesting because the gentleman, Henry Boyd, as he writes in his book, he was the founder of the Boyd Publishing Company in Nashville. And he would come to visit Reverend Washington's grandfather in Hume, because they were friends in slavery. And so Mr. Boyd was sold to Tennessee. And he is the one that introduced Reverend Philip Washington to the Sunday school lessons. And he wanted to bring it to Mount Morris.
So who was Reverend Philip Washington?
That was Reverend Alfonso Washington's grandfather. Right. And he, of course, was enslaved in the Hume, Markham area. And he became actually our 3rd pastor at Mount Morris. But he was friends with this gentleman, Henry Boyd, during slavery.
Got it.
And so he would come back and he introduced him, and Reverend Philip Washington introduced it to Mount Morris and the association, the Second National Catoctin Association. But they were very resistant because at that time, it was a second Catoctin, they were primitive Baptists. So they did not believe in Sunday school. So they rejected that idea. But later on, with a new pastor came in, they did incorporate Sunday school. Right. So I thought that was.
So can someone go to that resource and see that history?
For Boyd?
The Boyd book?
Yeah, well, you can read about it in Reverend Alfonso Washington's book, All in God's Time, but also at the African-American Museum in Washington, D.C., they have an exhibit talking about the Boyd Publishing Company. Also, what I use a lot for history is obituaries. Obituaries have just a wealth of information. Because it names parents, and I was able to pick up, find people that were present day members, and some of them didn't even know that some of their ancestors were, like the first mother of the church and all that. But when you are able to hold on to, now I don't keep the obituaries.
Mhm.
If they're members, I of course record their death.
Yes, yes.
And but other people who have had church services or funeral services at our church,
Mhm.
and I get a copy of their obituary,
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's just so surprising that you can say, oh, I can
Right.
link them with this person
Right.
who's at Mount
Mhm.
Morris, and then you
Right.
can link it with other churches in the community.
You have individual siblings,
Yes,
grandchildren.
grandchildren,
That's right.
and I mean, it's just such a, a wealth of knowledge that you
Yeah.
can just get there. We have the anniversary books that we have, you know, for each anniversary. Of course, our last one was the 150th. We had one before that, which was the 125th, which had information. Now, before me, there was, of course, Sister Mildred Gaskin, who was the church clerk for 50 years.
Wow.
And kept meticulous records and gave them all to me when she stepped down. So I have a lot of church records. It's interesting because the church clerk at Mount Morris initially were males.
Is that right?
Right. So, and they stayed males up until Reverend Bailey became pastor. And he was the first one to allow a female church clerk. But before that, they were always male.
So that means all the officers probably were male. Initially.
Yeah.
The only
for a long time. So it's so I thought that was interesting that you know these women weren't permitted to.
The women were the ones who
held it together.
Yeah, who held it together. They were members.
Right.
The larger members were women.
Exactly.
Membership were women.
Right. Yeah. So we have that. So I try
you do a marvelous job.
Well, I try to just keep recording what I think is so significant because I'm always thinking of who's going to come behind us.
Right.
Like I came behind, like Sister Bertha Cook, who was a member there. She did a lot of the initial church history for anniversaries. And so I used a lot of her notes. You know, she didn't have computer then, you know, you couldn't go and pull it up on Google. You couldn't Google anything. So all her work was going to courthouses and stuff, which I ended up doing as well. Because when I was doing the research for the history of the church, I actually started with the deed, you know, the land. So I wanted to know how they got the property. Right. So with that, I worked backward. Okay, so this is how they got the church. This is how they got the property. Who purchased it? How much did it cost? And who did they purchase it from? So our church property was purchased from the Julius family. Is that right? In Hume, right? And
they're still around.
Oh yeah, the descendants are still. Matter of fact, Carolyn Julius Green was the wife of our last pastor, Reverend Lindsay Green.
That's true.
So it was her family who actually sold the property.
Okay.
And to the church. And it's documented, recorded at the courthouse that if it should ever cease being a place of worship, that it reverts back to the Julius family. Right. So that's something I was like, oh wow, that's actually very nice. So so that was interesting to find out. So when you start with
little tidbits.
Little tidbits. So then you start talking to people and asking questions. My sister-in-law, the late Martha Green, of course, her dad was pastor of the church at one time. And so she was able to give me as much information as she could. And I was able to piece it together. So I want to tell people that whenever you hear oral history, there's always a grain of truth in it. It may not be exactly like you heard it, but it's a starting point. So anything that I hear that, And they say, well, that's what I heard when I was growing up. They told me this. And I just go and investigate it,
Right.
you know.
Pay attention.
I
That's
pay
true.
attention, and it's always a grain of truth in it. So using oral history from all the older members of the church, Sister Mildred, Sister Martha, the late Gladys Washington.
Yes.
You know, she's a descendant of the first pastor and the third pastor. She was a descendant, and of course, her sons became ministers
and pastors.
Yes. So it's almost like a tradition. So they're always, you know, so that's always interesting. And to be able to tell the descendants today, did you know that this was your, you know, great whoever, grandfather, grandmother?
This person was your relative.
Yeah. So that's one of the things, but it's the most important thing is preserving it.
Right. Yes.
And making it accessible to people who's going to come behind us.
Right.
So that has been what I've been trying to do for, I guess, the last 5-6 years is to really preserve it so that it won't be so difficult for the next people. And they can pick it up and carry it on, you know. So that has been,
it's been the journey.
Yes.
So do you have any recommendations as to the best ways to preserve?
Well, yeah, we were blessed. We were able to make a documentary on DVD to preserve some of the church history.
Okay.
As most churches, Black churches, the original members usually were attending church at a white church prior, you know, to emancipation. So it was no different at Mount Morris. They were attending the Thumb Run Primitive Baptist Church. And I always emphasize primitive because primitive, you know, means that, you know, they didn't believe in the Sunday school and, you know, it was just a whole different time. They believed in women sitting on one side of the church and men on the other side of the church. And
sometimes that happens today in meetings.
Yeah. And then even at that time also, like at Mount Morris, Providence Baptist, which actually the people who formed Providence Baptist actually came out of Mount Morris. Some of the members,
Providence in New Orleans.
Yeah, they, you know, they were original members at Mount Morris, and then they went what they call the New School Baptist because they weren't primitive. Okay. So they would, so they kind of broke off, and that's when Providence, Orleans started. And they used to come visit. Now, this is what I was told, and then Reverend Washington verified it, that they used to come to visit Mount Morris, but they could only come so far into the church. I mean, you know, because of their belief in Sunday school, and so it was they couldn't come. I don't think they could.
Other religions today, that are Christian religions, they don't go into the Baptist church.
Right. So that was the way it was then, you know. So I thought that was interesting when he told me that, you know. So
that is fascinating.
Yeah. But to preserve them is to, you know, have your hard copies, the actual copies that I don't think that you could ever go wrong with having the original information. Just make sure you have it in a safe place. And then to record it through the computer so that you'll have it in, you know, now you can put things up in the cloud and all that. You can, you know, save it that way and preserve it. Make copies of it. So if something does happen to it, you do have copies. So that's my goal. My whole goal is to preserve so that others that come behind me will have something to work with, to start from, and to carry it farther. So that's my whole goal.
That's the essence of what you do. That's marvelous. And I know it's an extraordinary responsibility.
It is. And like I said, if you can, we did a DVD outlining all of this from the very
Okay.
beginning,
Mhm.
from 1867 to 1941.
Mhm. The
is
history
the-
of the church.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
that's,
So how can that be found?
well, we have copies.
Okay.
If
Yeah,
someone
not
wants to
much
order a
like this.
copy,
Okay.
we can get you a copy of it.
Okay. Mhm.
So,
But it is, I said, an extraordinary responsibility because it's not as though a church clerk will come in and serve 2 or 3 years and go.
right.
Sometimes it's a lifetime commitment.
Yes, like Sister
Something.
Mildred. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be Sister Mildred.
Right, yeah.
I'll do the
Yeah,
best I
she got
can for as long
folks,
as I can, but um,
Mhm.
I don't know if I have that staying power. You know, those
Yeah, well,
50 years is a long time to be
Yeah.
church clerk.
yeah, God will give you what you need if
Yes,
He has a plan for you.
yes, He will.
Yes, and
Yeah.
if He has a plan, whatever His plan for you is.
Yeah, so that's basically what I do. Anything new that that comes up that I think is of interest or
Okay.
would be of interest of somebody,
Okay.
I try to preserve it
Okay.
and keep it.
Keep it available.
Mhm.
So maybe, excuse me, while I see if we might have someone in our chat room.
Okay.
You know how to visit the chat room?
So,
Should be at the bottom.
let's see. It used to be here. Oh, up here.
Chatty chats. Okay, let me scroll up and down. Let's see what they say. Chula Vista, California, man.
Chula Vista, California.
Yeah, who is that? Sandra Barlow.
Okay. So I click here.
Just read the message. Says hello to everyone from Chula Vista. That's outside of San Diego where I see it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you
Hello
scroll
to-
down, you'll see who could do a message. Okay, congratulations from Sandra.
Okay, so someone's asking, do the records physically stay with the clerk or in the church itself? Well, for me, like the record books that I have, the old ones, I actually have those at my house in a safe.
Mhm.
And most of the records are kept at the church. Like all the anniversary books, new members, certificates and all that. Of course, it's at the church. In case somebody needs to get there and ask for something, then it's available to someone else other than me if I'm not able to get there to hand it to them. So, so that most of the records are kept at the church. So they said, what is the name of Reverend Bailey? What was the first name? James Bailey was Reverend Bailey's first name. And actually he was from Loudoun County.
Okay, from Loudoun.
He was from Loudoun County, and actually his descendants are actually at our church too.
Is that right?
Pauline Newman, the Newmans.
Oh, yeah.
They are descendants of Reverend James Bailey.
Oh, man. Oh, that's interesting.
So, okay, so can someone research the records? Yeah, I mean, if there's records that you want to see, of course, it's available for you to see. You can come to the church and see them, especially the record book. I don't let them go out, but you're certainly welcome to come and look at the record books and to copy. If you want to make copies, you can certainly do that.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
They could probably arrange that on a Sunday service
or they can contact me or the church and just say that they would like to, get some records. It's a lot of information at Mount Morris, and Mount Morris has not only information about Mount Morris, but the community.
That's right. Yeah.
So, it's information about people who live there.
Right.
People who went to other churches.
That's right.
Because a lot of people don't understand that they used to share churches. Sometimes Mount Morris might have church at a church before they built a church.
Mhm.
At one church that was built on first Sunday, another church would have it on second Sunday, and another
Right,
church on
that's
third
right,
Sunday, and
that's
another
right.
church on fourth Sunday.
Right.
So they were sharing a building.
Okay.
And a lot of times these churches also served as schools for
Oh,
Black children.
Right, that's the truth. That's
So,
right.
and Providence and Mount Morris used to share churches all the time.
I did.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Yeah. And then in the Catoctin,
Second National Catoctin Baptist Association.
yes, then the churches, surrounding churches, like Poplar Fork.
Well, Poplar Fork is one of the churches in the association. Mount Perrin.
Right. Yes.
Who else is around in
Mount Perrin is in
Linden?
Linden,
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of churches.
Yeah.
Because Pennsylvania, because churches in Pennsylvania are part of the Second National Catoctin Baptist Association.
And I understand people from Pennsylvania would come down to Mount Morris for your annual gatherings.
That was a association meeting.
Yes.
Which is held every August, and that actually has been in existence. Actually the very first one held in Virginia for Second National was actually held in Berryville.
Is that right? Okay.
It was held, and it was, believe it or not, it was in a newspaper that the Colored Association took place here. And it was, believe it or not, 15,000 people attended. Yes.
From all over.
In horse and buggies. And of course, they couldn't stay in motels and stuff. So they stayed at different people's houses. People hosted people to come and stay. Yeah. So it was, yeah. I don't think we've seen 15,000 people at a Second National Catoctin Association in many years.
I didn't know 15,000 people could get in Hume.
Yeah.
So how many? A couple hundred.
Okay, someone wants to know, how can we get in touch with you? You can call me, or you can actually contact AAHA and they can get in contact with me. I'll just give them your information and I will contact you. If there's some information that I can help you with, I'll be glad to give it to you.
Thank you.
Somebody wants to know, how do you trace churches that have merged or are no longer current?
That have merged.
Well, if I'm not sure how you would, if you know the church and what it was named before, then I would start with public records. Because one of the things that I do as a clerk that I didn't mention before is I record trustees. I go to the courthouse to record trustees. So you can always look to see if there are trustees recorded for your church, and then that'll give you names to start with. That's one way. Then of course you can always interview people who were members at one time and to find out, you know, what they know or what you, or if there's still any records kept. I would hope so. And if they're merged, I don't know if whoever they merged with, I don't know if they took the records or what happened to the records. That would be something that you would have to ask some of the current people at that church. Let's see. Okay, the cemetery that's associated with Mount Morris is the Mount Morris Community Cemetery. It's a separate entity from the Mount Morris Baptist Church. So a lot of people think that the church we have nothing to do with that. They have their own committee. So if you need to get in touch with them, I can tell you how to get in touch with the members of that committee. And it's right in Hume. Matter of fact, it's just at the foot of the hill of the church. If you know where Mount Morris Baptist Church is, the cemetery is right down the road.
And it is a huge cemetery.
It's a very old cemetery. And so it has a lot of of course, members,
Mm.
past members of Mount Morris in it. Some of the tombstones date back to,
Mm.
you know, early 1900s, 1800s.
Mm.
Um,
And there are people buried there from other parts, other communities outside of
Mhm.
Hume, which
mhm.
makes it large.
Yes,
And the largest African-American cemetery in
Mhm.
Fauquier County,
yes. And it's
and probably close by.
right.
I wouldn't know about close by, but certainly
Yeah.
in Fauquier.
Yeah, it's a lot of the churches, most of the churches around, their
Mhm.
members, whenever they pass,
There's even
are buried there.
Even the old section of the Warrenton Cemetery where both of my parents and some of my ancestors are buried
Mhm.
seems smaller than Mount Morris.
Well, Mount Morris was blessed to get property donated, some land donated to extend the cemetery because it was filling up.
Yes. Yes.
So they are opening, I think they're opening the new park this year so that there'll be
That's
more.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That there's property close by
Yes.
that becomes available to
yeah.
people who want to be buried
Mhm.
near their
Right.
ancestors.
Yeah. And
That's a real blessing.
it truly is. Yeah. So it was one of the neighbors who donated
Mhm.
property that's adjacent to the church. They donated some
Mhm.
more property. But it's one of the places that I go for history is cemeteries.
Yes,
So
that's right.
and
Yes.
one of the up the road from Mount Morris in Markham, going to Markham, is the Leeds Episcopal Church.
Mhm.
And they have a really old cemetery.
Mm.
So when I was doing research, I would be reading some of the records of the people at Mount Morris who were former slaves.
Mhm.
And I, you know, it would be different information about them and who owned them and whatever.
Yeah.
And I could go to Leeds Episcopal Cemetery
Mhm.
and find these people in their cemetery, their cemetery, you know, the people who own them.
Yes.
Because you know their cemetery is really old too, but it's
Sometimes
really,
there's a connection
oh,
in terms of
absolutely,
relationship.
oh, absolutely, it definitely is in all of the
Descendants.
yeah. Mount Morris started at Thumb Run, like I said before, a Primitive Baptist church, which was a white church.
Okay.
And they were just so gracious. They gave me all their records.
Mhm.
And they listed their colored members.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
beside their members,
Some
they would say slave or free.
Right. Mhm.
And so I used
That's so
that.
right.
And then I looked at the record book of Mount Morris,
Yes.
you know.
Mhm.
Now these people, it's interesting to read some of their notes because, you know, they couldn't spell really well, but you knew what they were talking about. But they kept notes and I'm always in awe. I'm like, okay, look, I have computer, I have
Right,
recorders,
yeah,
I have all this stuff. But these people are right. Yeah, these people, you know, right out of slavery, they were writing, making notes, you know, and some of the words, yes, misspelled, but you knew exactly what they were talking about, you know. And I'm like,
so
this,
rich.
yeah, and
So
it's
rich in
just,
history.
yes, it's just, you know, truth when you take nothing and make it at something.
That's
and they
right.
really did. So, but I was reading the Thumb Run records where they listed the slaves, the free people. Matter of fact, our first pastor of Mount Morris, Cornelius Gaddis, was the first pastor, was ex-slave. He ran away and I don't know why he came back, but anyway, he came back. And I always say it was in God's plan, because he was going to make him pastor of a church. So that's why he came back. Right. You know, I'm thinking, you got away, would you come back for? But, you know, our plan is not God's plan. So, right. So he came back, and in their records, they made him apologize and beg, and I think the words were, beg the pardon of the church for running away.
That's
So he had to
interesting.
do that.
Mhm.
And then
And then he became pastor.
yeah, and later on,
Yeah.
they were secretly meeting anyway,
Mhm.
but they didn't have permission to.
Right.
So when they
Yes.
finally were free, they left. And then they have
Mhm.
I have the meeting notes where all these slaves, the war is over, and
Mhm.
they leave the church, and they
Yeah.
send all the colored members who left, and they
Mhm.
named the female and the males.
Mhm.
So one of the
That's
ladies
amazing.
in the congregation that run was a free lady,
Mhm.
and she turned out to be the mother of our second pastor.
Is that right?
Right. So
Mm.
so that's why it's important to keep records
That's right.
and to read,
Mhm.
other people's. You're going to have to go to courthouses
Yes.
to get land records,
Mhm.
see, how it was purchased, how much it cost, who purchased, who were the purchasing
Yes.
agents,
Mhm.
and who sold it.
Yes, it's valuable information,
Right.
not only to members, to
Genealogy.
genealogists,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
historians, to
Mhm,
church historians.
mhm. So
It's
it's
amazing. Yeah.
okay, what is Mrs. Lewis's email address? Okay, somebody needs your email address.
I can be found at C. Lewis at AAHA.org. So they can find my
Okay,
email
to
address.
everybody, thanks you for preserving the history of Mount Morrison churches in Fauquier County. Can AAHA or another group help with scanning of the record of the church books? Maybe ask for donations or find a grant. That's a good idea. Okay.
So the
Okay.
question is, could AAHA do scanning or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
They need to contact the AAHA.
Yeah.
Through our information desk.
I think he's telling me that maybe. Thank you for preserving the history. This is Joseph Roby. History of
Hello,
Mount Morris
Joseph.
Church in
Yeah.
Fauquier County, and another group helped with scanning the church books.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Joseph Roby was one of our guests.
Okay.
Yes, and he talked about those enslaved at Oakley and Upperville.
Oh,
It
really?
was marvelous. Yes.
Oh, I need to. Now that's interesting.
So you can go into our archives and view that.
Okay, so Karen says scanner is available at AAAH. Oh, thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
I will be out. Yeah, so it's it's almost addictive to start delving into history,
It is,
especially
it
history you
is.
didn't know before.
That's right. Because
And-
more and more interesting.
Mhm.
And it's like any research, you go looking for one thing and you find
Mhm.
something else you have no idea about.
Right.
And you move away from what you originally started out
I
looking
know.
for, and you have this whole new source of information available
Really.
to you.
And now I've been so guilty. I have a friend that I grew up with, and I was doing some research, of course, on my family, and I just happened to stumble across a name, and I started reading about this gentleman.
I know.
And so I call my friend up and I say, Anthony, was your great grandfather named Charles? And he goes, Darlene, I don't know. And I was like, well, find out. And he was like, why? I was like, did you know that he was arrested in Fauquier County back? And he was like, well, but then I got him interested.
Yeah.
Then he just got hooked, right? So he tells me all the time, thanks a lot. Now all I do is spend my time on genealogy ever since you told me about my great grandfather. So
that's wonderful. It's a marvelous connection.
Yeah.
We share.
I love to share information with
sharing
other people,
yes,
that don't know.
Right.
It is, if you don't know,
Right. Especially about their own people.
About your own people, about your family, it's
so good to know.
It's so interesting. And it also just points back to the fact that these churches have stood for as long as they've stood.
Yes.
And from generation to generation to generation,
right.
starting with nothing.
That's right. That's true.
And
Absolutely.
Look at where we are today. So we shouldn't take that for granted.
No, we shouldn't.
You know, those people worked hard.
Mhm.
They
And
kept the
paved the
faith.
way.
Yes.
They kept the
It's
faith.
only because of them,
Mhm.
of course, with the Lord, that we're where we are.
That's
So
right. That's
that
right.
should never, ever be taken for granted
That's
and
right.
just, you know,
And we should carry the information on down to
Yeah,
other
and-
generations.
right. Because we, you know, they did without a lot of things.
Sure they did.
They
Mhm.
put up with a lot of things. I mean, I
Mhm.
see where people are giving 25 cents, you know,
Yes, right.
um,
Mhm.
some gave 15 cents,
Mhm.
you know,
That's
and
right.
who knows, that might have been all the money they had. you
And
know.
back in those days, it might have been a lot.
Yeah, 20,
Mhm.
you know, 25 cents for this and 15 cents for that.
Right. You added up.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But everybody gave,
Right.
you know,
That's
what they
right.
could.
Right.
So, and today Mount Moore still stands.
Yes. Mhm.
And
It's
my
huge.
prayer is that somebody will come behind us and just keep it going. That's my
Yes.
prayer.
Mhm.
So-
And they will. They
Oh,
will.
they will, yeah.
Now, Morris has been around this long, and the other churches that have stood.
Right.
Yeah.
And all the churches that are connected.
That's right.
Because now Mount Morris was considered the mother church
Mhm.
of the association,
Yes,
because
yes.
that's where it got started.
Mhm.
So, and it, you know, it was so many churches in
Mhm.
Loudon,
Right.
Front Royal, Fauquier,
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, that were part of that association.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's
And even
one of
people
the
outside the
oldest.
association, come to
Mhm.
Mount Morris on big days, and other
Mhm.
churches.
Oh, yeah.
On big days. It's so important, the homecoming. During the summer, from June on to September, there's a homecoming service, or there has been a homecoming service somewhere
Yeah.
in Mount Morris.
And all the other churches around. And that's a tradition that I hope does not die out.
Yes, yes.
You know, I know the pandemic has
Mhm.
caused a lot of.
The pandemic had its purpose.
Yeah.
In God's time, people will come back
Mhm.
together,
Mhm.
maybe in a different way.
Mhm.
But we-
Oh, that's all I have, unless other people have any questions.
So the chat room looks clear. Well, thank you, Darlene, so much. I really, truly, honestly, we here at AAHA, our staff, our board, and our volunteers just appreciate your coming back, because you did visit us before.
Right.
To share what you know about collecting and preserving church records, because it's so important to the life of a church.
It is.
Whether it's a small church or a large church.
And not only that, to the community.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
to the community.
To the community. So again, we thank you and appreciate it. And for those who are with us, we thank you also again for joining us today. And on our next event on March 14th, same time, we will have another member of the Mount Morris Baptist Church, who is Barbara Newman. And in recognition of the International Women's History Month theme, which is Women Who Tell Our Stories, Barbara Newman will come and tell us about how she tells our stories through the church in her plays and in her dances and other performances in the church. And a month from now, on March 28th, yours truly, Christine Taylor Lewis, will be the guest of Karen Hughes White. And I will give my family history and some genealogy information. So please join us in March for our next virtual events. And again, we thank you so much, audience, and we thank you dearly, Darlene, for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and we will close out. Yes. Thank you so much. I need to shut up the